Getting us recorded. All right, so let's get started as we look at today's agenda. Thank you again for being here. So as I just mentioned, we are going to be looking at some updates and reminders, as well as some really important updates about the new IEP. And I'm so excited about showing you what's coming as we start the new school year related to the new IEP. And one thing that we introduced at the end of last school year that you're going to continue to hear a lot about from me and others, you're going to see this language in grants you might apply for, in contracts that we establish with vendors, that, you know, the idea of our education vision for the state and what we're trying to do through anti-racist, inclusive, multilingual, and multicultural approaches to education, and really with a very singular focus on, you know, the students in our state, particularly those who've been most historically underserved. Like that image that I just showed before the recording began, we want to be thinking about, you know, all this work we're doing, right? And it's not easy, right? There's a lot of challenge to it. But what should it add up to? And we want to make sure that we're thinking about what's that experience that students have in the classroom. And I think that with everything that we are sort of asked to do, that we're responsible for, I think we always have to keep that centrality of the classroom in our minds, particularly as we begin the new school year. And so I know here at DESE, what we are going to keep pushing ourselves on is opportunities that we create where that learning experience really focuses on students being known and valued, including their families, that learning experiences are relevant, real world, and interactive. Hopefully you hear those three words from us a lot. And that we create individualized supports that allow students to excel at grade level and beyond. And I think that's really where our new IEP can come in, to really define those supports that help our students, that really sort of accelerate our students into grade level expectations and beyond. So you're going to be, you know, hearing about this a lot, maybe like a broken record, but it's really something that we are super excited about and really hope kind of drives all the work you see from DESE in a more cohesive way as we go into the future. Let's look at a couple of our special education updates and reminders, and I'm going to do the reminders, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Jamie Camacho in just a minute to walk through some updates. So just as we get started on reminders, there are a few policy reminders that I just want to kind of re-raise to your attention as we start the new school year, things that could be helpful to you and your teams. These are documents that we've written in the past but are still relevant now, really the first three that you see there. So again, as we start the new school year, you know, DESE is very focused on how do we, you know, safely respond to students who have more escalated behaviors in our schools. And we know that there are strong alternatives to, you know, directing students to a timeout room, or using restraint. And so our document that we released a couple of years ago, just, you know, if it's helpful to go back over that with your teams, to really be thinking about, you know, how can we maintain students in classrooms, particularly where, you know, students have had, you know, challenges because of the pandemic. You know, being fully present in the classroom, we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to reduce the amount of time that children are removed from the classroom. So we hope that just that reminder of, you know, what we're trying to do to reduce or eliminate the use of timeout rooms is just front and center as we start the new school year. The next two are not, you know, special ed specific, but, you know, very special ed adjacent. I know how much in my role as special ed director, we were, you know, just always involved in working around education stability, particularly best interest determinations. So that second bullet about education stability for students in foster care is some guidance that we put out a couple of years ago. It still remains relevant, up to date now. So if you are needing to remember or go back over with your team what expectations are for best interest determinations and the school district's role in that, especially because many of you oversee more than, you know, just special education, depending on the size of your district, it is something to always, you know, be thinking about. And then, you know, this is the time of year when we have to make sure that we are training all of our staff on their responsibilities as a mandated reporter. And so first, you know, there's our advisory on mandated reporting. And bear with me, I am going to stop my share because I have a resource that I'm really excited to share with you about mandated reporters. And it's a new training. Actually, this just went live yesterday. Oh, you can't see it yet. I can see myself really big, and that is not a good sign. All right. So this is the state of Massachusetts mandated reporter training platform. So this is an IT solution for providing the mandated reporter training that you have to have all of your staff go through, particularly that, it's on an annual basis. So every year your staff have to be trained on being mandated reporters. And, a lot of times we do this ourselves. I remember both as special ed director and superintendent, this is a responsibility that, we had to take very seriously, but usually it was sort of an in-house training that we did. This is great. It's a resource that you can use, and you can access it right here. It starts with just a reminder about mandated reporter training, but then this is what's in the course: the general training, profession specific modules, an exam, and a certificate. Another potential use of this to be thinking about is for your staff who start after the start of the school year, when maybe you're not running the training like you did before. Maybe you've got this all figured out how you do that. But in the event that it's useful, I just want to share that with you because it is really, really up to date in terms of a resource that's just now available. So let me start my share again. That's it for my updates. I hope you particularly find that new IT solution for mandated reporter training useful as we go forward. But Jamie, I'm going to turn it over to you now to give some updates, starting with indicator 7.
Sure. So indicator 7, we've reminded you about this a couple times, so you've seen this slide before, but just another reminder that you have until August 31st to put your data into the ECOS database. There's contact information on the slide. If you have any questions about it, reach out, and our vendor AIR will answer any questions that you have. Indicator 14, Russell.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you. It's another reminder for indicator 14. So the survey data collection will end on September 15th. So that's coming very quickly as well. We want to make sure that we get as many responses as possible. So just some reminders here for you as well. If you have any questions about indicator 14, reach out to Greg. He'd be happy to answer any of those questions as well. I think you all have seen this before as well. We sent out a kind of a summer checklist quite a few weeks ago. But I just want to go over a couple of things as far as the IDA grants, particularly for the 262 and the 240 grants. So we're getting grants in. So these are some of the things that are just reminders and just some clarification based on what we're seeing. So the conditions of assistance are just a reminder, making sure that you're completing the entire form. It's the whole thing needs to be uploaded, not just the signature page. And there's a place in there that the superintendent needs to identify the date that he or she has either already met with leadership, so school-based leadership, to talk about the conditions of assistance, or will be. So you just need to make sure that that date is actually filled in as well. And that will make your review go quicker. We'll move on to the next one, Russell. This is the GEPA statement. So I know this was new this year. You may remember that we had given you, there's a link here for what we as the state provided for our GEPA statement to USCD. And that's just a model, it's just an example for you. So you need to make sure for question number 1, it's what your district's statement is. So it's not DESE's, it's your district's, and it's not just for IDA, just a general statement that really addresses the GEPA requirements. Questions 2, 3, and 4, we all have barriers. So what we're expecting that there's going to be some barriers that you're addressing, and not saying that there aren't any barriers. It'd be kind of very unlikely not to have any barriers. So we're looking for questions 2, 3, and 4 to be answered. They don't have to be a long list, but we're expecting that through your root cause analysis and your improvement planning that you have identified some barriers related to students with disabilities. So questions 2, 3, and 4 should also be answered. We'll move on to the next one, Russell. MOE. So if you have your district is out of compliance with MOE, GEMS will prompt that information, so you'll know. If you have any questions regarding MOE, you might notice that we have a new inbox, a IDA fiscal inbox. So any questions related to fiscal, you can reach out to that inbox, and somebody from Caitlin Hogan's team or Caitlin will also answer your questions, and you'll get much better information on MOE than I can probably provide you right now. CEIS, again, this is just if you have already been identified, you were identified last fall, you need to make sure that you're putting your 15%, you're reserving the 15% of your funds, filling out the budget. Same thing for making money matters, that's M cubed. If you were identified last fall as being a district that needs an NI district for your LEA determinations, you also will need to put your 2% reserve and budget for that as well. So just remember for 4 and 5, those identifications were from last fall. So it's kind of lag data. Moving on to the next one, Russell. Equitable services. So again, making sure that you're uploading your written affirmations. This is really important. We have to report to OSEP to USCD on September 1st. So for those of you that have already uploaded your have completed your GEMS application, the written affirmation is already in there. We'll be able to account for that. If you have not, then we'll also account for that after the September 1st. But the written affirmation must be uploaded if you are receiving resolution funds. Questions on that, reach out to us as well. We're happy to answer those questions as well. I think we're on to the next one.
Yeah, I think, yep. Do you want to start by just mentioning about Director of Administration?
Oh, yes. So you might have noticed that the invite that came out to you for, we usually send out an email. Bob Hannafin usually sends it out. There are some changes happening in DESE. We're trying to make sure that the agency is taking a different approach to providing communication to you that looks more uniform. So the information that you get, including the invites to these meetings, is going to come through, which looks more like our newsletter that we send out or a bulletin. We don't have the ability to add people into that. It's actually pulled directly from the Directory Administration. So it's really important that that information is updated and current, because we won't have the ability to just add people in like we have done with emails in the past. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody knew that. And I also want to make sure that you know that that's how you're going to get the invitations from us. They'll look differently. And I don't know if they go to like your spam folders, but you should make sure you check in those folders as well for the invites as well, because that's how they'll come. It'll come in this format now moving forward. I think that's it.
We're using a more unified email system now. And so like you're saying, Jamie, it won't look like a DESE email anymore. It'll look like that newsletter, right? Yeah, okay.
Right. Exactly.
Great. Okay.
Thank you.
So as we start the new school year, just want to remind you of the dates for our special education leaders meetings that are coming up. October and April, you'll see that we still have as TBA. We are pondering if we can do in person, looking a little less likely, I'm not going to lie. So it's likely that by our September meeting, we'll announce October and April and just round out the year. But for now, you can hopefully just tuck away these other dates and have them ready in your calendar so that there are no surprises as we roll around. And I'm sure that during this year, we're going to have a lot more information about the new IEP and whatnot. That'll be, hopefully important for you to attend these meetings. So with that in mind, actually, I want to go to new IEP updates. And so we're really excited today to talk to you about some of the resources that we're making available now and in the very near future, and how you can provide feedback on some of the resources that we are developing and we'll have ready this fall. So without any further ado, let me just jump into it. The topics that I want to go over with you today are our synchronous resources. So live trainings, live events that we have for you to learn more about, help train up your teams in order to be able to, customize learning for stakeholders in your school system. So the live events that we have coming up, we'll talk about as part of the synchronous resources. The asynchronous resources are on-demand resources, so anything that we have in writing, any other type of media that you will use to share resources that you can use with your communities. Jamie will come back and talk about grant support. And then just to round it out, I just want to give you a quick update on the trainings that we've been doing this summer, both internally here at DESE and then externally with other state agencies and other stakeholders in special education that we've been doing this summer. So let's jump to some of those synchronous resources. We're really excited that we are going to be able to launch training of trainer sessions this October. This is what we said we would do last year. So if we recall, the districts that are starting to implement the new IEP this year, it's a self-selected but more limited number of schools and districts that are starting to implement the new IEP this year, approximately about 40 out of a universe of about 500 are starting to use the new IEP this year. We had an online training last May 31st and June 1st, 2 half days that we brought teams together and did a training of trainer session for those schools and districts. Everyone else indicated to us, those of you who joined us right now indicated to us last spring, most of you who were joining us now, indicated to us last spring that you're planning to fully implement in the 24-25 school year. So this training of trainer session that we are having on a regional basis, a one-day session, October 16th through the 18th, is where you need to make sure that you are sending a team or joining a team to come and learn more about the IEP, get your questions answered so that you can go back in that second box and, take the information that you get in October, the resources that we provide you in October, and be able to kind of train your teams during the rest of this school year, during next summer, so that you can be ready to launch fully in the fall of 2024. In addition, another synchronous resource that we will have for you then are monthly office hours. And you've seen DESE doing more of this across the board. And we've also heard about how instrumental monthly office hours have been to other states as they've rolled out their new IEP. So we're really glad to offer this resource as well. So let me just tell you a little bit more about both of the training of trainer sessions and the monthly office hours. So first of all, and I just want to mention, there are a lot of links in today's presentation. We're putting them all in the chat. So if you look in the chat, like this this link to register for the training of trainer sessions, that is in the chat. And so you can go ahead and click that and get right into the registration. In addition, obviously, we will share the slides during the presentation. At the end of the presentation, we'll post them online. But, keeping in mind the training of trainers workshop is for school and district personnel to come and, again, gain that information by getting that deeper understanding of the form itself, kind of making a plan for how the small team that comes to this meeting will be able to go back and train educators and other stakeholders in their local context. And then, just make sure that you're able to be thinking about, how you are going to implement both efficiently and effectively, and really work on that collaboration between gen ed and special ed through this process. So you can see that we have 3 dates, October 16th, 17th, and 18th. And they are, the locations are listed there at Devens, in Waltham, and in Springfield. Our Springfield location does accommodate a very large group. So if you click to register, and one of the other sort of central or eastern Massachusetts locations, those 2 other locations are full. Look to the Springfield location. Mass Mutual Center accommodates a very large number of people. So, I worked in West Springfield for 10 years. Western Mass is not that far away. It's not as far away as you think. People used to say to me, "Where is West Springfield?" The name actually implies where it is, and it's not that far. And so think about Springfield even a little bit closer if you're coming from Southeast Coast or North Shore or Eastern or Central Mass. Springfield is very accessible and a place to think about if those other sessions are full. So, I would say, my advice as you are starting this new school year, think about who are those staff members you want to have join you. We're saying up to 3 staff members coming with you. We are reaching out to our largest 3 districts, Boston, Worcester, and Springfield, to talk to them about how we can individually, we're reaching out to them to talk about how we can accommodate and potentially even larger group from those communities. But on average, we're looking for up to 3 staff members to come to the training of trainer session, October, get the new school year started. Hopefully this is maybe a good time to come, so you still have plenty of time during the rest of this school year, next summer, and the start of next school year to continue on with your own training of your staff. Similarly, for the office hours, we are sharing with you right now the link to register for our virtual office hours, which very consistently are going to be held on the 2nd Thursday of each month from September to June, from 2 to 3 o'clock. So you can, go ahead and register. Our hope is that, you can bring your questions, get, kind of formative feedback, get that, question answered as you are working to implement. You're going to have, just different things are going to come up along the way. You can bring your questions. I also hope that the listening to others, learning from your colleagues will also help. And, sharing your own feedback, your own tips, your own advice will be useful as well. So, That's a place to, just get that ongoing support for implementing the new IEP. And we're really glad to just share with you the dates right now. Again, we're putting the link and we're putting the actual PowerPoint in the chat. So, you don't have to scramble to write them down right now before I go on to the next slide. You can certainly write them down afterwards and just hopefully, think about who do you want to make sure just, kind of available to attend on a monthly basis to both bring questions and to listen to feedback and advice from others. Let's move to the asynchronous resources. And there are a few that I want to share with you right now. We're actually going to do the stop sharing of my screen again and take you right into one of them in just a second. So a really important tool that we know we want to have available, that we will have available by October 16th is the process guide. The process guide is the kind of written directions for how do you fill out the new IEP. And we want to get stakeholder feedback on this prior to its final release in October. So we have put this out, or we will put this out in 2 sections. Section 1, we released on August 3rd. So it's already up. I'm going to show it to you in just a minute. You can access it by going to the IEP improvement website on our webpage, on our webpage on our website. So the IEP improvement web page. April, I wonder if you could grab that real quick and put it in the chat because oh no, on the next slide we actually do have a link. I do apologize. So I'm going to share with you a link in just a minute, but we've released section 1 of the process guide that includes sections like the vision statement, the present levels, accommodations and modifications. So that draft that we've completed for those sections is up, available for your review, for your comment to us, to let us know what you make of it, how helpful it is, what else you might need. The remaining sections, everything else that we haven't covered yet, will be released in early September. And that's going to include sections on English learners, service delivery, transportation, and others. So now that I've sort of oriented you to what we are doing, bear with me. I do have it queued up, so this is only going to take a second. Here we go. Share screen. And we are live with, this is what we have posted online, our IEP process guide stakeholder version. You'll see the drop watermark. And just as a quick kind of, using our good nonverbal reading, or our good nonfiction reading skills, what do we see here? So for each section of the IEP that is available, that we have completed so far, you're going to see a screenshot of that section. So here you're seeing, a screenshot of the student and team vision, and then our brief write-up on kind of what considerations are for how you complete this section, and then even some examples. And we tried to write them very briefly so that you are able to, this isn't hopefully, tedious to read. You can get right to the point. Hopefully the subheadings really help you get to where you need to go. But we just wanted to offer, some advice on how to fill out the IEP, how to conduct a meeting to get the meaningful information that you need in order to produce a high quality IEP. So as you can see, that section 1, I've highlighted, I just want to talk about present levels because it's going to lead us into when I show you our sample IEP. But let's just take a little, now that I've shown you that first section, as you remember, present levels, there are 4 components to it: academic, behavioral, emotional, social, communication, and additional areas. So 4 components to present levels, where we're describing the present levels of performance. So it begins with an overview that applies to all 4. And then, just like I said before, there's that screenshot and more information relative to just that section. But let's remember, and we talked about this a little bit in the spring, but I think this is a key area where, the IEP, the new IEP maybe helps us sort of refresh some of our practices as it relates to writing IEPs, and particularly how we use information about the present levels to build an even better IEP, a better understanding of the student, so we create a better IEP. So just that reminder about, using clear, easy to understand language, the most essential information, the most relevant information, and then, relying on conclusions from evaluations rather than reporting extensive details from evaluations. Know that very often a habit that I hope we get out of as a state, frankly, is that in many cases after the meeting, this isn't discussed during the meeting, but after the meeting, we are very often cutting and pasting large sections of students' initials or 3-year evaluations into the, how we currently describe a student's present levels. And it's not discussed at the meeting. It's additional information that's sort of added in, I would argue kind of sort of packed into the IEP. But how much did that really help develop a better set of goals, a better service delivery grid for the student, when frankly it's not even discussed in the meeting? And so what we really want to say is, like, show how we're using those, like, really important conclusions from evaluations, and as opposed to cutting and pasting large sections of evaluations into IEPs. We want to talk about present levels holistically. So another thing that I hope we change as we implement the new IEP is that when we talk about something like language arts for a middle school student, we talk about it as a subject that's owned by many of the participants in the team meeting, including the English language arts teacher, but maybe input from the history teacher, maybe input from the parent, input from the student, that helps us develop an overall understanding of English language arts rather than a report out by teacher that we often see in IEPs where, the history teacher said this, the math teacher said this. Let's talk about the subject, not the practitioner. And then finally, just making sure that we talk about the student's strengths, interest areas, preferences in relation to the whatever section we're on of the present levels. And as opposed to right now where we talk about a student's strengths, preferences, interests overall, but they don't really help us develop that better understanding and use a strength-based approach to understanding the student and developing a better IEP. So just want to pause on that one for a minute to kind of show you the type of language and narrate some of the language that we develop, because we very humbly provide this to you to say, give us feedback on this. Like, is this type of direction helpful? What else might you want us to say about present levels? So I'm not going to do this for every section, but I did just want to show this with you because then I want to show you what it looks like in a sample IEP. So again, a little bit more information here about, examples or other considerations. And again, I'm just going to scroll quickly so you just get this sense of what's here. Just this idea again that we keep showing you the screenshot and then writing about it. I also want to mention we have built-in resources, so would love to get your feedback on the resources. In the survey, we ask, like, what should we keep? What do you like? And so, we want to make sure that if there are aspects of this that you like, that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If these resources are helpful, make sure we hear that from you, so we don't inadvertently remove something that you find useful. So again, not trying to make you dizzy, but just trying to get quickly to kind of anything else to share with you. I wanted to point out this part really quickly about how we created this table for a side-by-side comparison of what accommodations and modifications are. Again, as we kind of reapproach the IEP, refresh our experience with using the IEP, just a good time to go back over what is the difference between an accommodation and a modification. So this type of feature to the process guide, I just want to point out to you. And again, humbly request your feedback as we develop this process guide and make it as strong as we possibly can. So that's really it overall. And I just want to show you at the very end, there are some additional resources overall that we put in here. So it just ends with, an overall set of resources for your consideration too. So that's the process guide. And again, like I mentioned before, that's section 1. Hold on. Grab the PowerPoint for today. Sorry about that. Here we go. Share screen again. All right, so in presentation mode. So like I mentioned, that was section 1. Section 2, we're going to release in early September. And like I mentioned, here's where you get the link to be able to review what I just shared with you. We're going to, again, like I said, section 2, we're going to release in early September. It's going to be the full version. So we're going to add in section 2 to what you see in section 1 so you can see the whole thing. And then again, we want to start by, getting feedback now so we can iterate on it. So we're going to close the survey that we have up right now for the version for section 1. We're going to close that on September 1st and then put up a new survey so that you can give us more feedback when we release the second version or section 2. So I hope that's clear. I hope that if there's anything you need to know, certainly including it in the Q&A, and I'll take a look at that when we get to the end of today's presentation. Another synchronous resource that we were going to share is our sample IEPs. So we're going to have 3 by the time we get to October. We have one that is, I'm going to share with you now on the screen. We are going to email you next week. Just like Jamie talked about, we're going to use our the directories that we have and the information that we have from our overall special ed contact list to let you know and to remind you of some of the other details that we just shared with you in an email next week to let you know when the sample IEP that I'm about to share with you is fully available. But just a reminder that, it's just a way of seeing like, what does this look like in practice? Because that's something that you've asked us a lot about, like, show me what this looks like. And so, and really, hopefully it's a good training tool. So this is the last time I'm going to do this before I go back to my presentation once and for all. But here we go. I've got it all queued up. Here is our sample IEP. This is what you are going to see next week when it comes to you. So again, really just our sample IEPs. This is the first one. It's a preschool IEP. We're going to cover other grade levels. We're going to cover other disability types. We're going to include an English learner with our additional sample IEPs. But as you start the new school year, we want you to have this just in case, you have some plans to be discussing the new IEP as part of your PD at the beginning of the year. We think this sample IEP, getting it to you just as soon as we can, will be really useful for training purposes. I really want to stress that, this is a fictitious student. We don't know this student. And so a bunch of us worked on this, all trying to kind of conceptualize who the student is. So we're not putting this out to say this is the best IEP that could have been written, because it's a student who doesn't exist. And that made it kind of hard, frankly. But it's meant to be illustrative of this is how we can write the IEP using the new form. So I just want to point out a few things to you as we get started. Again, this is a preschool age student. So we have her statement, Nia's statement about what she wants to learn this year, or by the time that she gets on to the next grade level strand, what she wants to learn. We see the team's vision, their response to the student's vision reflected here. We see that the student has more than one disability, but neither is identified as primary. That is something that we're going to keep. It's how it is, frankly, on the current IEP. It is how we will continue to move forward. Just a little footnote, we are updating the other forms. So this is important. We are updating the other forms associated with the IEP, including the eligibility flowchart. That is where we will ask about primary disability, not on the IEP itself. Remembering that primary disability is only needed for federal reporting purposes. It is not needed for planning for a student. We want to think about the student holistically. We want to see how the kind of constellation of student strengths and needs helps us consider what the student needs. So again, I want to connect the dots between what we just saw on the process guide to what we see here, particularly in present levels. So remembering that we've got these 3 sections to talk about in present levels: the student's current performance, their strengths, interest areas, and preferences, and then the impact of the disability. These are all required components of describing present levels. How do we make sense of it? So first, just notice that in our sample IEP, we have a very brief statement of what the results were from, from the Battelle. And this is, 2 sentences, right to the point. And I could imagine this being discussed during an IEP meeting. This, we could present this to the team in parent-friendly ways and user-friendly ways. And then notice that, we're looking to incorporate information and data from various sources. So we also have some observation data here in terms of what happens in large groups, large group activities, and what else the student is working on. Notice the way in which we describe the student's interests in relation to academics, since we're on the academic section. So we see not only her strengths, but also her interests and preferences in this section. And then finally, what we found ourselves doing a lot under the impact section is where we tied back to the student's disability types. So this is a student, remember, who has a communication disability and a developmental disability. And so we start, you're going to see us writing a lot about, the developmental delay it impacts the student in this way. And this is also, again, I just want to be very clear about how when we define this, or when we determine the student's disability type, we, stick with the 13 disability categories that are identified in statute and regulation. Under the impact, this is where we can, though, use a more medical terminology. So if the student has Fragile X, if the student has dyslexia, this is where we could describe that further. In this case, the student has a developmental disability, so it matches. We're not going to try to add more language about a more specific diagnosis made by other professionals. But in the other samples, you're going to see us do that, where we take start by identifying one or more of the 13 disability categories. And then under the impact, you're going to see us write more specifically about a student's disability. So I just want to show, again, how this works. I'm not going to go over that for the other areas like behavioral, social, emotional, only just to point out that as we have to do for all students, we commented on this student, this fictitious student, how bullying might impact her. And so you'll see, again, I'm not going to go over it right now, but just want to point out that something to look at with your teams in terms of how we describe the bullying consideration that has to be included for all students. And again, just want to point out as we get to communication, since this is a student who has a communication disability, how we wrote this statement under the impact of the disability for the communication section. And then finally, when we get to the additional areas, this is a student who has some motor and sensory motor issues. And so what I like about what we've attempted to do here is to incorporate both observations that were made at home, in school by educators, and from assessment data. So that's what this sentence is sort of leading with. We can kind of put together observation data and assessment data, and that's what you're going to read here. And the rest of this section is information about both. And we don't have to separate them out because we're trying to create that holistic image, that holistic understanding of this student. Next up are the accommodations and modifications. And, I think this is helpful that we've got the process guide up so you can kind of do, our draft process guide. You can look at how we've described what you need to know about writing accommodations and modifications given this new format, right? So we have more categorization of accommodations. So I just hope, again, I won't go over them now, but I hope that by seeing some of our examples, we'll know like what's the difference between presentation of instruction versus response versus timing versus setting. And again, we also challenged ourselves to be brief, right? To include a limited number of accommodations, because we know, particularly for general education teachers and special education teachers, we need these to stay in working memory. You need to kind of remember what's most important about this student that we need to apply accommodations for. And that needs to be a focused number of accommodations in most cases. Again, with modifications, I just wanted to show, again, the difference between, in this case, modifications to instruction, modifications to student output. Again, if you go back and look at the process guide, I hope you see that connection between how we've described the difference between accommodations and modifications, and then how this can provide a direct example of that. And I hope that's helpful. Under the measurable annual goals, I think this section is a little, there's not as much change here from the current IEP, because there's some additional fields, some additional detail that we're looking for, but it's not, it's actually, we're pretty used to writing goals and objectives. So just want to show you what an example looks like. Again, this is probably where it became the most challenging of writing goals for a student who doesn't really exist. So I would say use this as sort of a idea of what it can look like, but we're not saying that this is the best example of goals and objectives. Notice that there are two goals for this student. So we have one around social emotional behavior, another around communication. And again, hopefully it's just useful to take a look at that. No, I'm sorry, there are 3 goals. Don't listen to me. Anyway, Then we get to the schedule of progress reporting. So that's at the end of all the goals. We talk about how often will progress reporting occur. Remember, we've moved up the section about participation in general education, formerly known as the non-participation justification. We have now named it the participation in general education because we really want to strive to have as many students in the least restrictive environment as possible. So take a look at how we've worded this about the participation in general education and what the student needs. I think one thing that I really want to focus on this statement with you is the focus on instruction and why, if a student can't be in general education, what is it about the instruction that's changing? It's not, you know, special education isn't a place. And we need to be thinking about how are we intensifying instruction? What's different about those services that will ultimately, hopefully, lead the student to being in a lesser restricted environment because of the interventions we're providing, because of that higher level of instruction that can sometimes occur outside of the general education classroom, but as a means to an end. And so really just wanting us all to be thinking about how we can just really focus on instruction and services. The service delivery grid is not radically different from the current service delivery grid. Again, a little more detail, but not overly different. This student doesn't have transportation needs, so nothing checked there. However, the student does get ESY, and so under schedule modification, we describe how the student will receive services during the summer. She's getting speech once a week. And so we see that she's receiving that on the ESY grid that is separate from the school year grid. And again, not needing transportation, anything other than what the same manner is provided for students without disabilities during the summer. And that is basically it for the sample. So thanks for letting me wax on there. I hope you found that helpful to take a look at. And we will soon again be emailing you to let you know that that's available for your own consumption, your own ability to interact with. And we do anticipate that to be just next week. So again, that's the sample IEPs. We have additional resources coming soon that we look forward to releasing for you. They are listed here. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go over them. And have Jamie come back and talk to you now about the implementation grant that we are making available for you.
Okay, so we will be releasing this grant hopefully really soon. It's going to be a targeted grant. It'll be called the IEP Implementation Project Grant. Just want to mention that all of this information that I'm giving you right now is really to help you with your planning. Obviously, whatever I'm saying right now will be fine. It's final once it's actually posted. So things are subject to change, but this is what tentatively we are proposing. And again, it's for informational purposes so that you can try to be ahead of things. I know it's a busy time of year. So we want you to know what you should expect as far as what this will look like, the funding, how you're going to respond, and what type of information we'll be looking for from you. So it's a 274. You go on to the next one, Russell.
Yeah, of course.
It's going to be open to all public schools, charter schools, collaboratives, and approved special education schools. What we did was we took our total amount, which is $10 million, and we did a baseline for every single school or district, and then we added funds on top of that based on enrollment. So it's not the same across the board for every school and district. It does matter about how many students you have enrolled that have been identified as a student on an IEP, and but there's a baseline, so everyone starts with at least a funding amount that is the same. The project duration, just so you know, it'll go through September next year.
There we go. Yep.
That's okay with me. So the purpose of the funding. So this is what is really important, I think, for your planning purposes. You're going to need to explain to us what you're going to be using the funding for. And these are the three categories that you'll most likely see. Planning and implementation. So it could be a lot of different things when you're talking about planning and implementation. It could be creating the plan. It could be monitoring the plan, adjusting things. You could also be looking at training, professional development, and coaching. It could be for special ed staff, related service staff, gen ed staff, administrators, families, students, a variety of things. You also can use funding for the creation or any kind of updates to your web-based IEP tools, communication related to that. It could be any type of things that have to do with your IEP system. So it could be a combination of these three things. It could be one of these three things, but you'll have to provide us with a brief narrative that's going to explain how you're going to use the funds as it relates to these three categories. And again, tentative, but this is what we're expecting that you'll be seeing. The next slide, Russell.
Yeah.
Thank you. This is a really dense slide, but I just wanted to give you an idea about allowable costs. So this will be posted with our presentation like it always is. It's pretty simple as far as what is allowable, what won't be allowable. But I think this might help you with your planning and just to be able to think about things ahead of time. And then this last piece, so how are you going to apply? So we will be, we're building this application right now in the new GEM system. So it'll be through the new GEM system. It will be a very simple application, but it is a targeted grant, so you do have to respond. And it will be done through that system. A couple of things that are important is if you do not have things set up, and I think there's a couple collaboratives or approved special ed schools because they don't have the 240 and the 262 grants that don't have their GEM system set up. You will need to make sure that that is all set up before you're able to actually apply for this because it will be through the GEM system. If you have questions on this, again, reach out to us through our fiscal inbox. And there's a training video here about GEMS. If you're not familiar with it, I think that is all actually helpful. So that particularly for those not schools and districts, because you're doing the 240 and the 262, but mostly the collaboratives or the approved special ed schools that are not using GEMS, this might be really helpful to you, this training video. And I think that's it, Russell. We're expecting this to come out very soon. It just depends how quickly it is for us to get this into GEMS. And get this application built. So you should be seeing it very soon, and we'll send that out in one of the bulletins like Russell mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Jamie. And I hope that gets you thinking about, again, you know, as you're planning your training, particularly knowing that the grant goes through next September, these are grant dollars that you can use during this upcoming school year. You can use them next summer. We know there's going to be some need to maybe transfer data from your current, you know, the current format that you have to the new format, perhaps. Some stipend money to be able to train people maybe during the school year, maybe next summer. So we really wanted to be as flexible as we could with how we developed this grant so that you can use it that way, and look forward to getting it to you really soon. Great. So we've been busy this summer, also just making sure that as we roll out the IEP that lots of other stakeholders are well informed about it. And so done a lot of internal trainings. A lot of different stakeholders, including special ed directors, have asked us in the past, when are you training the BSEA? And so we actually have done that this summer. And so a lot of great collaboration with the BSEA to help them know more and answer their questions about the new IEP. Because, you know, we know that this could reach their door already as we start the new school year because of the 40 plus schools and districts that are already implementing the new IEP. So really important. Our other special education teams within DESE, and then all other DESE staff having available drop-in sessions. Then we've also done some external trainings, really just, you know, doing that overview of like walking through the IEP and having, you know, one of us narrating what to know about the new IEP for advocates, for our IEP software vendors. We've done 2 meetings with the software vendors, professional organizations, and then other state agency partners that you can see the alphabet soup there. But I'm sure you're familiar with many of those organizations. And we are just really pleased that our state agency partners really took a strong interest in the new IEP. So we are excited about that. There are more trainings coming in the fall for lots of these same organizations. And I'm glad for any suggestions that you might have about how we move forward. So we have about 10 minutes for questions. I'll have the recording stop.